everybody. So today we're gonna do a fresh new tutorial. It has been over 3 months since my first tutorial, where basically you got to watch me make Freshies for the first time based on other YouTube tutorials that I had watched. And it was kind of like, you know, how easy is this? Let me show you how I'm doing it, and let me show you how it turns out. So 3 months in, I have made a ton more Freshies. I have done a lot more research. I've learned a lot more stuff. All basically the best ways to do the Freshies and have them come out really just the best you can. So I'm going to be giving you all that information that I've learned, tips, tricks. I'm going to be answering a lot of questions that I've been getting in the comments regards to where to get beads, where to get oil, and just all of those types of things. So to start off, we're going to begin with what you need. Everything you need to, this is just going to be a basic Freshie, not a lot of embellishments. We're not going to talk about vent clips today, things of that nature. It's just from start to finish with mixing your beads and your oils all the way to coming out of the oven and putting the string on, that kind of stuff. So first and foremost, of course, you need Aroma beads. These you can get at a lot of different candle supply websites. Not all of them offer the beads. I've learned that through most people, they don't really prefer to use beads off of Amazon, although you can find them there, unless they're the buy it, ship it beads, because a lot of people just order straight from their website. And I believe if you do that, it's less expensive than if you order them off of Amazon. So places that you can get them: Aztec Candle Company, Lone Star Candle Supply, Buy It, Ship It, and then Stay Fresh with Peanut, which that website in particular, I've never ordered anything off of there, but I definitely plan to in the future. They're kind of a one-stop shop for most everything that you need to make Freshies. The Mica Powder, the beads, the fragrance oil, cookie cutters, molds, they have all kinds of stuff on their website. So if you wanted to just go to one place and kind of find everything as opposed to shopping around several different websites to find everything that you need, I would definitely check that website out. And that again was Stay Fresh with Peanut. Next, you need your fragrance oils. I have 3 different ones here from different companies. So this one is from Wellington Fragrance. This one's from Aztec. That's one of the websites you can get the beads from too. And this one is from Lone Star Candle Supply. They also offer the beads. So all of the ones that I've tried so far have been great. I haven't had any issues or complaints with them. Some of them can be a little pricier than others. I have found that Aztec is kind of the most cost effective. It's probably the company I'll be ordering from the most, because typically, this is an 8-ounce bottle. These on most websites will run anywhere from like $12.99 to $15.99 for the 8-ounce. Most on Aztec range from $8.99 to $11.99, which for me was, you know, I definitely am going to try to get as much of my supplies for the least amount of cost as possible. But you will run into with, for instance, Aztec doesn't offer all of the fragrances that Lone Star does. So if you're looking for a particular fragrance, you may have to order some from one website and some from the other. And let me tell you this, when you have to do that, it hurts. Shipping, it kills me. Shipping is probably, I mean, it's an expense, especially if you're ordering from different companies. So I typically try to find, you know, 4 to 8 fragrance oils at one website that I really, really want, even though it might not include one over here at this other company. And I order my beads, my fragrance oil all from one place, pay one shipping fee. And then the next order, I may go to the other company and buy that other oil, that other fragrance that I was really wanting but couldn't buy in the last one, and pick out a few other fragrances from them and my beads. And so I'm only paying one shipping for that as well. If you were to get 6 different fragrance oils from 6 different companies, it would be, you'd probably pay more in shipping than you would in oil. And that to me is just crazy. But unfortunately, that's the way it is. So those companies, I had the Lone Star, I had Aztec, and I had Wellington. But you can also get the fragrance oils, like I said, at Stay Fresh with Peanut. And there's Crimson, Buy It, Ship It, where you can get the beads. They also have fragrance oil. Basically, any candle supply company is going to offer the oil because it's the same exact stuff that you would use to make candles. It's the same fragrance oil. So you can just search any candle supply website and find just an array of different fragrance oils. So next we're going to need mica powder. This was a set that I talked about in my first tutorial of 25 different colors. I have used so much of these, and a lot of these bags you can't even tell that I've made a dent in. So I think this was maybe 15 bucks and it has lasted me so long. I also got these off of Amazon. I haven't even used them yet, but this was also, I think, $12 or $13 for all of these. They're easy to find. You can search them under like mica powder for resin or for makeup. It's all the same stuff. So then of course we're gonna need cutters or molds. This one's a little bit smaller because I use it to make little vent clips. This one of course makes the rounds. You can find all kinds of molds everywhere. Some really, really neat ones from Michelle's Creations and K&L Innovative Creations. I got these two from Hobby Lobby, so you can find some there. Cutters, I got these from Ann Clark Cookie Cutters. Actually, I take that back. This one I got from Ann Clark. This one I got from Hobby Lobby. They didn't have the regular circle. This was a donut. It had like a circle in the middle and it was all attached. I had to rip that inside part out because I could not find just a plain circle cutter. You can find some other ones at Hobby Lobby too. Or you can find them if you have like a specialty baking shop or a cooking shop. You can find them in there. They usually have a good variety of cookie cutters. All right, nails, of course, these are going to be put in the Freshie, in the cutter before baking, and you pull them out so that it creates a hole for your string. These I just got at Walmart for like $1, $2, something like that. They're just aluminum common nails, 1.5 inch, nothing special. And your cookie sheet, of course. I only use this one for Freshies. I guess if you were to put parchment paper down, which is completely acceptable, you could use one that you use to cook with. I wouldn't really advise doing that, just because, for instance, this little, I don't know, you can see this little burn spot on there. I forgot about a batch of Freshies that I had in the oven and they sat in there for 40 minutes. And when I got to them, they were boiling. So it's probably better just to have a separate one. You could use your old one and buy a nice new one for cooking. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. So moving on, we are going to start mixing the beads. In my first tutorial, I did it with cups and tablespoons. And like I said, I never had a problem with that. But the issue with that is that I could get a little bit more fragrance oil in there, but without weighing it out, I would run the risk of oversaturating the beads and them not drying. So I have moved to using a scale, so I make sure that I can get the perfect amount of fragrance oil into my beads. And also, so because I offer these to sell, I want to have a very consistent product and I want to know that I'm doing everything I possibly can. So if somebody contacts me and says, oh, well, my Freshie doesn't smell anymore after 2 days, I will know that it wasn't from lack of fragrance oil and that I have done everything that I possibly can to make that Freshie last. Hope I never have that problem. I haven't had it yet. So we're gonna talk about ratios. There's 2 different ratios you can use for your fragrance oil. You can do a 4-to-1 ratio, which is the same thing as an 8-to-2 ratio. It's just doubled. Or you can do the 8-to-1. So when you break it down, if we want to keep it straight, it's an 8-to-1 ratio or an 8-to-2 ratio. What that means is you will have 8 parts beads to 1 part fragrance oil, or 8 parts beads to 2 parts fragrance oil, just depending on how much oil you want to add. Some fragrances are definitely stronger and don't need the full 2. You could still do it. It's not going to hurt anything, but it may not be completely necessary. And then other fragrances, say for instance like leather, it is so light and I struggle to find a really good strong leather fragrance. So I will always do an 8-to-2 on that, because I mean, I just can't do enough to make leather smell strong enough. Now, when I say parts, 8 parts beads, 8 parts, 1 part oil, we're talking about weighted ounces. So 8 ounces of beads to 1 ounce of fragrance oil, or 8 ounces of beads to 2 ounces of fragrance oil. And here's another one of those supplies that you need that I forgot to mention, jars. And they come in different sizes. This is probably the most efficient way, especially if you're ordering the larger bottles of oil and you want to cure in as many beads as you can the fastest. There are jars even larger than this. I feel like those would be really heavy and difficult to shake, even just this size after shaking a bunch of them, your arms start to burn. This one is heavier. Your arms start to burn a lot faster. So I can't imagine what it would feel like to be shaking a larger jar than this. But you could do it if you wanted. These tiny ones, they don't make very much beads. I used them, like this one I'm using as a tester. I wasn't sure if I was really crazy about a fragrance oil, so I thought I'd just mix a very small batch, so I didn't, go in and mix a bunch of beads and then decide, yeah, I'm not gonna use these, and then those beads are wasted. So this is just like a sample that I mixed up so I can bake it and just see how it turns out. But I have also used these when I was doing, I did like a rainbow effect, and I was gonna do that several times. And so instead of mixing mica powder into small batches for each individual one, which would take forever, I would just mix a small jar of 5 different colors. So each jar was a different color. I had 6 of them. And even though they don't mix that much beads, because I was putting 6 different colors into one cutter, I was only using a little bit out of each jar with each one. And so with a large batch that I knew I was going to be doing several rainbow Freshies, this was the way to go, and it was a good size to use. This one is the size that I started out with. I will still use these jars, probably not as much as I'll use the big ones, but this is one with Aztec. When you order an 8-ounce bottle of oil from them, you get a free 1-ounce bottle as like a sample. So going back to the ratios, we know that if I've got 1 ounce of fragrance oil, I can make 4 ounces of beads. So with those little samples, I still mix them up, and you can get 2 or 3 Freshies out of this, depending on the cutters or the size. Or if you're doing vent clips, you can do more because they're smaller. So we've got different size jars here. Today, I'm gonna be mixing in this larger jar. It's one that I've already cured a batch of 1,000 wishes in, or 1,000 wishes. So I'm just gonna be using this again and doing a whole nother jar of this fragrance. Now, with this, you can see that's 4 ounces of beads, and it's kind of like about halfway full. So with this one, when I add in 8 ounces of beads, it's still only halfway full, and I can get some more beads in there. So I had to figure out if I wanted to do more than 8 ounces of beads, which I know that if I doubled it to 16 ounces of beads, it would not fit in this jar. You want to make sure that you do have enough room in the jar to shake really well, and the beads expand as they soak up the oil. The beads themselves actually grow. So, and I'll show you the difference. I've got a jar that's almost done. And I'll show you the difference with the dry beads once I pour them in here compared to like beads that have already soaked up most fragrance oil. So since I've already done this, I know that I can get 12 ounces of beads comfortably in this jar. But what I had to figure out was, because it wasn't 4 ounces and it wasn't 8 ounces, I had to figure out how much fragrance oil I needed. So basically what I did was I did the 8-to-2 ratio. So with that, I know for every 4 ounces of beads, I need 1 ounce of oil. So I can fit in this jar 12 ounces of beads comfortably. So 12 divided by 4 is 3. And that's how I figured out how much fragrance oil I need. So since it's basically like I'm doing 3 batches of the 4-to-1 in this jar. So 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 1 is 3. Now I'm gonna show you how to weigh everything out, weigh your beads and your fragrance oil. Some people do this a little bit differently. Some put their oil in the jar first and weigh it, and then add their beads to the jar. Others, like myself, what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be putting the beads in first, measuring that out, and then measuring the fragrance oil. So we're gonna turn the scale on. I hope you can see that. Okay, you can. And we're gonna put the jar on, and we're going to tear the scale, which is going to set it back to 0 so that we're not weighing our jar. And I'm going to pour in 12 ounces of beads. And I'm trying to read the scale upside down. It's a little confusing. And there's a clear. All right, so we've got our 12 ounces of beads. Now here's a different way you can do this here too. We can either start adding the fragrance oil and know that since we're putting 3 ounces in, we want this to stop at 15. Or, which can be easier, we're gonna tear the scale again, reset it back to 0, and now we're just weighing the oil. So we'll just stop when it gets to 3. If you don't like to add, then this is definitely the easier way to go. Here we go. All right, so we've got that. And like I said, in my first video, I was mixing the mica powder in with the beads and the fragrance oil, and that was helpful for when I knew that I was going to use those colors over and over again. Sorry to move y'all back up. So I don't do a lot of make to order right now, so I just kind of decide on what designs I want to do, what colors I want to do, and the shapes and the fragrances and all of that. And I really, it's helpful if you're making a large batch to mix your micas in at this point right now. I'm not going to do that because I want to leave these to be colored later as I want to use them. And we'll talk about how to do that and things to look out for if you're mixing your micas in after your beads have cured. All right, so now we're just gonna shake like we did before in the other tutorial. Get that all mixed up. And forgot to do it with dry beads, but it's okay because it hasn't actually absorbed any oil yet. You see how the beads are higher in this one? It's because they've begun to grow from soaking up that oil. So they start to fill more of the jar. So if you fill your jar too much when you're adding your oil and your beads together, what will happen is you won't give them room to like expand, and it will really slow down the drying and curing process and could possibly even prevent it from, you know, from continuing, and you'd have to pour some of it out into another jar and it would just be a lot. So just be careful not to, I say never fill over, you know, like 3/4 of the way up. Like leave some space so that you can shake them really well, mix them up, and then let them have that breathing room to grow and expand. We're gonna set that aside, and I want to, in my last video, as soon as they were dry, you know, the day after they dried, I was baking them. At that time, I had not seen or read or, you know, nothing about allowing them to cure. There's a difference between letting them dry and letting them cure. So once they're dry, the curing process begins. They still continue to soak that oil up. The oil just penetrates the bead even further, which will make your fragrance last longer because it'll be a slower release. If you bake them right after they're dry, most of that oil is just sitting on the surface of the bead, and it will be baked out in the oven. Like the heat will cause that fragrance to be released. It will make them smell weaker and not last as long. So you always want to make sure that after they're dry, you let them sit for an additional 7 to 10 days. Some people even do more. I've seen a few people last month that are already mixing up their autumn fall fragrances and getting those ready and just gonna let them sit and cure for the next several months until it's time for fall fragrance. So I have one of my jars that it's been a couple of days. You can still see a few beads sticking here and there. This is not dry yet. So this has not even begun the curing process. Some oils take longer to absorb than others. Some take a day. Some, like leather, could take 3 to 4 weeks. I've seen some people that even have their leather soaking for 2 months and it's still not dry. So be aware of that. They're all different. Be patient. If you need them to dry a little faster, there are a couple of things that you can do. You can put them on your porch or your windowsill in direct sunlight. On the porch is better because it's warmer outside. On the windowsill, they'll still get a little bit more warm, but you've got your house set to a certain temperature, so it's not gonna get too warm. But outside in the sun, but I'll say that if you do that, there are some fragrances that will turn your beads yellow in sunlight. Some, like this one right here, is just yellow. This hasn't been in the sun, it's just the color of the oil, and it turns the beads yellow like that. This one, you know, the fragrance oil was clear, so the beads are still very white. But you can get a fragrance oil that when you mix it, after a day or two, it looks like this, and you can go put it out in the sun to help it dry, and it will turn yellow. So be aware of that. I have kind of avoided doing the sunlight one just because of that reason. What I have done, I've tried a heating pad, just laying my jars on a heating pad and kind of cover them with the blanket and shaking every so often. That helped a little bit, but it didn't, you know, not enough to really make an impact. What I recently did was put a space heater in my laundry room and put all of my jars in there and made sure it stayed about 85 degrees, and that cut the drying time, I would say, in half. And I say in half because I did test. I had jars mixed of the same fragrance. I mixed them at the same time. I kept some in just a room in my house, and the others I put in the laundry room that was set at 85 degrees, and these dried, the ones in the heat, dried twice as fast. So make sure that you let them cure. You can still bake them as soon as they're dry, but you're not gonna get as much out of them they may last a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, and then they'll be done. Whereas if you let them cure, you could get 4 to 6 weeks, maybe even, I mean, I've got one that I had given to a family friend, and after 2.5 months, she said she could still smell hers. So it did make a difference for me. I did notice a difference between baking them straight out of the jar once they were dry, and the difference in letting them cure for 7 days. So I would advise to do that. It's not something that you find on a lot of other tutorials. Okay, so moving into coloring the beads. This is the method you would use if you don't want to add your mica to the fragrance oil and you know, be committed to that color for those beads. You can do it after. And we're just going to take a paper plate, put our cookie cutter on it, and we're going to fill the cookie cutter so that we can measure out how many beads we need for this shape. If you look at these cookie cutters, there's typically a little lip at the top, this little ledge. That's where I like to fill the beads up to. So not all the way up to the top, but just to this, right where this little lip starts. Okay, so that looks about good. We're right there. So now we know that's how many beads we need to fill. I'm gonna take the cookie cutter off. I'm gonna use these little plastic cups to mix my micas with the beads. You can use Ziploc bags, you can use your jars. If you have any empty jars, you can use those as well. So I want to do two-tone. So I'm gonna take my beads and I'm gonna pour half into this cup and half into that cup. And you can see through these clear ones. These clear ones are nice so that you can kind of match the levels. That looks pretty good. And I'm gonna use my new Mica Powders for the first time. I'm gonna do white and this really pretty blue color. And I have my little mica spoon. This came with one of that sample pack that I got initially. This came in there with it. If you don't have a little spoon like this, you can use a popsicle stick or like the handle end of just a kitchen spoon. So I'm gonna put about that much into the white. And then I'm gonna do the same here for the blue. Should have probably had these open already. Now, what I wanted to touch on is if you're adding your mica powders after your beads are dried and cured, you want to be cautious not to put too much powder in them. If you put too much mica, it could prevent the beads from properly sticking and melting together in the oven. So if you're doing this and you're afraid, oh no, I think I just put too much powder in there, get a couple of more cups, shake your beads up, pour your beads into another cup, shake them up, pour them into another clean cup. It will start to leave that extra mica powder and that residue behind in each cup, so you can kind of filter it out a little bit. And I'm just gonna spin it. If you had a Ziploc bag, you just, you know, shift everything around in it. I'm just gonna spin this and mix it up. I'm gonna spin this one. So the white came out really pretty. I'm good with that result, but the blue is still very faint. I want it a little bit more vibrant than that, so I'm gonna add just a bit more. About the same amount that I added the first time. That's pretty close. I think I can get it a tad darker. I'm not gonna do a whole another scoop the same size as the first two, probably about half that amount. You can just keep adding until you get the shade that you want. It's way easier to add than to take away. Keep that in mind. All right, so that's really pretty. Although, I kind of want to make it a little bit more teal. It's a pretty baby blue color, but I am a huge fan of teal. So I'm just gonna add a tiny bit of green, and that's another thing with these mica powders. If you don't have the color you want, you can kind of custom make colors by mixing powders together. Doesn't hurt anything, and some of the results comes out really pretty. So you probably can't tell much of a difference, but it changed the hue just a tad, which is exactly what I want. So I am going to run and get my spoon. Okay, so I've got my spoon, and I wanted to talk about this as well. So I see a lot of people using like plastic spoons, and they're not really cupped at the bottom, so the beads have a tendency of falling over the edge, and they're really hard to control when you're like putting them into the cutters. This is actually like a tablespoon from a measuring set, and it's a lot deeper, so I can put more beads in without them spilling over the edges as I'm working with them, which helps to keep things, you know, from getting too messy. So I want to do white. My cutter from popping these out has gotten a little misshapen. All right. So as I poured them in, I'm gonna change the angle a little bit. They do have a tendency to roll out of place. I found instead of using something to separate it, it's almost easier just to push them into place where you want them to make your lines, and then add in layers. So you could fill this area now with a different color to the same level as the white, and then add white. And if you just keep going back and forth to build the beads up into the cutter, it keeps them pretty separated without having to use a piece of paper, which sometimes was just a fail, disaster. It would move, it would shift, and it didn't do a really great job. So I'm just gonna scoot these down. You can also, if you're starting with one cutter, sometimes I'll just shift the cutter to kind of roll the beads all up against one side. All right, now I'm gonna, like I was talking about in layers, now I'm gonna start adding the blue beads. And it will help from the white ones rolling into areas they're not supposed to. And now that we've got a little bit of that in there, I'm going to add a nail. I do this after I've gotten some beads in there because it helps it stand up. If you've got the nail in there and you start to pour the beads in, sometimes it knocks the nail over and you got to stand it back up again. So when I'm doing two colors like this, I always start with the outer edges so that I don't accidentally run out of the color of beads I need for, you know, if I'm filling a lot right here and I've got that filled up and I run out of beads and I don't have enough to fill these areas back up, it's really hard to shift them where you want them without getting the colors all mixed up. So always start from the furthest points that are gonna be that one solid color, and then I work my way towards the middle. And I'm gonna go Back in with my white. And then again with my blue. And I do want this one a little, I don't want the line like super sharp in between. So I do want them to kind of combine a little bit. So I'll go in and I'll hit the line between. As I do each layer, I'll put a layer of the other color in. So now I'm going back to the white. And I'm gonna fill a little bit more. And then I'm gonna let these beads kind of overlap the blue ones a little bit to make kind of a nice ombre effect. So we've got the base colors where we need them. And now I'm gonna start kind of fading and making a bit of an ombre, which is a little bit of beads I have left. So I'm gonna cross up into the blue a little bit. And just sprinkle those around, and now I'm gonna take the blue and do the same thing, cross over into the white a little bit. Looks like I left a few white beads still in here. Make sure I get all of them. Looks like this corner could take a little more. All right, and then I'm just gonna pat it flat. Make sure that the beads are even in the cutter. And sometimes with these shapes that have like a larger area in the middle, because it can take a little extra time for the center to bake, I will push that down just a tad bit more to make it a little bit thinner. All right, but there you have it. Hope you can see it well. And we're gonna pop it into the oven. Now, when it comes to cooking times and temperatures, so first tutorial was 350 for 8 minutes, and that was all right. Most people live by low and slow, so that it's better to cook at a lower temperature for a longer period of time as opposed to cooking at a high temperature for a shorter period of time. Anybody that's ever done any kind of baking or cooking, you know, ever made pancakes, knows that if you cook fast and hot, what usually is going to happen is your outside is going to be cook a lot faster than the center, and so you're going to be left with maybe burnt edges and raw middle. Same thing goes for these Freshies. So now I've started doing 325 for 10 to 12 minutes, depending on the shape and size of the cutter. If I'm using molds do require a longer cooking time. Also, the silicone mats that you can bake on, they require a longer cooking time as well. So I think typically if it's just a cookie cutter, if you're using a mold that's about the same size, then add 2 to 4 minutes, but keep checking it every 2 or so minutes. So this one has been in for about 10 minutes. I'm gonna take it out and I'm gonna show you how to check to see if it's done. I just take one of my nails and I just tap the top, and you see how it kind of, you could see it raise. That means that the beads in the center aren't sticking, which signals to me that they're not melted in that middle part. So I'm gonna put it back in for another 2 minutes and we'll check it again. It's been 2 minutes and we're gonna check it again. See, I'm not getting any of that puffing anymore. Everything's staying together. So I'm gonna say that this one is done. Now you wanna be cautious not to overcook them, and you'll know if they're overcooked because the beads will be melted together. You won't get as much of that bumpy texture. So like over here in the corner, you can see, you know, where it gets warmer. There's a tad bit of over baking just in this edge area where it just looks kind of flat and shiny. That is a sign that it's been over baked, and you want to be cautious not to do that. It's been about 15 minutes since this came out of the oven, and the edges are still warm. In my first tutorial, it was like, let them cool 20 to 30 minutes, I think I said. And then I came back and did a second video, like a follow-up, and said, let them cool for even longer because they're so much easier to get out of the cutter. And that was true, but there seems to be, I started seeing people say, no, take them out of the cutters while it's still warm. So I tried that. There's like this middle gray area. So when they're still warm to the touch on the outside, not hot and not like super squishy, like you can't push it down and squish it, they do come off and out of the cutter pretty easily when they're still this kind of, you know, warmer temperature. You want to make sure though, you can see like it's starting to pull away. So you just be careful of that because they are still soft when they're a little warm. But after this point, for about an hour, they become more difficult to get out. After that hour, if you let them cool to, I mean, just, they've been sitting there for an hour or more and they are just completely cool, they also pop out really easy because they almost separate from the cutter on their own. But while they're warm like this, they're still very easy to get out. If you watch my first tutorial, it was like a struggle to get them out of the cutters. But while it's still warm, it kind of slides out. So it's just a preference. If you're trying to get more in the oven really quickly, then of course, take them out while they're warm and not having to cool them for a super long time is beneficial. So I like this method. I also like to bag them up when they're still warm so that if any of the fragrance oil, you know, that's still kind of coming out because they are heat activated, it's already airtight in the bag as that's happening. So I feel like I lose less of the fragrance and the scent. Last and final steps are trimming and hanging. I'm going to show you how I hang mine. Now the trimming, you don't necessarily have to do. It's kind of a preference. I do it on some of mine and then not on others. It just kind of depends on the effect that I want. But if you get a lot of those spikes and you don't like those spikes, you can just take a pair of regular scissors and trim those off. And while it's still warm, it makes it super easy to do this because the scissors just cut right through. The cooler it gets, a little bit more difficult to cut whatever this material these beads are made out of. I'm just gonna go all the way around the edges. These corners and little crevices can be a little bit harder to get. I also like to trim around where the nail was and get those spikes off. Makes hanging a bit easier at times. And then I'm gonna take I use this twine jute row. I'm gonna double it up, and it's about 11, 12 inches long. Cut it off because I like them to hang a certain way. I've learned that I'm just gonna stick this through. And I'm gonna tie just a regular, I'm gonna start a knot just like you would if you were tying your shoes. And then I'm gonna go around and do that same exact thing. And when I'm done with this knot, the strings are facing outward like that. So when it's hung, it hangs straight, like the front hangs forward like you would want it to. And then I'm just gonna take my 2 ends. Now here's another, thing that you don't necessarily have to do. If you're selling them and you wanna know how long you should make this or you're not sure, you can leave them unattached. And then whenever the person buys them, they can tie them themselves to the length that they want. I typically just go ahead and tie the ends. And make sure, pull it real tight. And then there you have it. Thank you guys for watching this video. Hope it was super informative. There are so many things that I added in here that I wish I would have known when I started. So next I could be doing a tutorial on vent clips, also known as venties, using glitter. There's a couple of other neat little things you can do with these, and I'm definitely going to be making some more tutorials on that more specific type stuff. So stay tuned. If you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and do that and like this video. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. Thanks.